exposed. The incredible transformation of a poor teacher on a blind date with a millionaire CEO. Sarah was a high school history teacher scraping by in a quaint Midwestern town, where the clanging church bells struggled to mask the gnawing anxiety in her stomach. Today was different, though. Today, she found herself on an extravagant blind date with Jake, a CEO from the city. Her heart raced nervously, each thump echoing the juxtaposition of her humble world and his affluent one. The aromatic scent of homemade pies wafted in from a nearby bakery, but the thought of her crumbling car and crushing student loan debts clouded her mind. What could someone like Jake possibly see in her? She adjusted her dress, feeling the cotton fabric pinch slightly as if it echoed her insecurities. The restaurant was lavish white tablecloths, crystal glasses, and an air of sophistication she seldom breathed. The chatter around her felt foreign, yet Jake's warm smile and easy laughter soothed her unease, even as attention began to creep in. Their conversation flowed, and as he spoke about his extravagant travels and business deals, Sarah felt increasingly small. With every word from his mouth, her stories of budget planning and late-night essays turned into whispers of an alternate universe, one where success was measured in dollars rather than the impact on young minds. She wanted to impress him, yet the contrast felt like a sharp knife at her side as the dinner unfolded. Conflicting emotions surged within her. She admired his ambition, yet the flicker of jealousy sparked. What right did she have to sit with him? Would he laugh if he knew that sometimes she had to skip meals to save for car repairs? Deep down, Sarah questioned whether she could hold her ground. Her confidence began to fray. She had spent years shaping the minds of her students, yet here she was, battling feelings of inferiority ignited by the lavishness surrounding her. They later attended a networking event that enveloped her in an ocean of designer suits and elegant shoes. Jake, still every bit the dashing executive, introduced her with pride. But she became painfully aware of the whispers and glances directed at her. The teacher. Her heart quickened, its pace an irregular drumbeat as questions coiled through her mind. Did they see her value as she did? Did Jake view her as a badge of honor for his standing, or merely as an accessory to flaunt at industry galas? Then, the conversation turned toward educational reform, spurred by a curious executive who posed a question that struck a nerve. Sarah felt an urge bubbling within her. Was this the moment to reclaim her dignity? She gathered her heartbeat into resolve and spoke out against the elitist sentiments flitting through the air. Success isn't defined by wealth, she declared firmly, but by the difference one makes. Silence enveloped the group. Jake's face faltered, caught between admiration and embarrassment. Her truth hung in the air, thick and taut, and the riposte from the room was swift and merciless. Snide remarks cut through the tension, and Sarah's cheeks burned. Did Jake truly believe in her ethos, or was she just an amusement for the evening? As his hand found hers, fumbling through attempts to defuse the moment, she felt the ground slipping beneath her feet. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The pain of that night lingered, morphing into a determination she hadn't felt before. Instead of retreating from the discomfort, she channeled it into advocacy for educational equity in her community. Energized, she crafted workshops, rallying together parents and students, igniting a new passion within her. Yet, despite her unwavering purpose, the lingering question of Jake haunted her. Would he reach out again, or was she destined to be a fleeting whim in his grand tale? In the midst of her new mission, her phone buzzed. Jake's name glowed bright against the dim light of her living space. Can we talk? The urgency of the message sent her heart racing anew, twisting the knife of uncertainty deeper. In that moment, Sarah knew her choice lay heavy before her, tainted by the weight of her circumstance, and would carve the trajectory of her future profoundly. Sarah took a deep breath, staring at her phone as if Jake's message were a lit match threatening to ignite the dry kindling of her insecurities. The coordinates of her existence had shifted. She had unflinchingly stood up in a room full of powerful figures, only to find herself straddling the line between an affirmation of purpose and the nagging question of her worth. What did she want? The thrum of her heart echoed in her ears, urging her to decide. She could respond and explore the possibility of rekindling whatever flicker of connection had been ignited that evening. But with that came the prospect of stepping back into a reality she had begun to challenge. Did she dare risk the surge of self-esteem she had begun to cultivate? The anguish of self-doubt became a dull percussion in the background as she wrestled with her vision. Instead of running into the chaos, Sarah needed to prepare to reclaim her narrative. After a moment of hesitation, she typed hesitantly, "Sure. When and where?" The response came in seconds, inviting her to a cafe downtown, where urban energy clashed with her quiet Midwestern retreat. As the appointed time neared, anticipation mixed with an unsettled sense of dread. What could he want? She felt it pulsing inside her, that whispered terror of still being just an auxiliary in someone else's charted course. The cafe buzzed with activity, the barista's hands a blur as he expertly crafted drinks, layering colors that seemed to mock her simplicity. Sarah had spent her life navigating not only the emotional tribulations that came from her profession but also the stark realities of a working-class existence. Yet now, standing at the threshold of this crossroads, she committed to being fierce. No more hiding behind the curtain of fragility. Jake arrived, his presence commanding without being overbearing. He was as striking as she remembered, but there was an air of seriousness in his demeanor. It foreboded important conversation. They exchanged pleasantries, but Sarah's mind raced ahead, forcing her to steel herself. "Thanks for meeting me," Jake began, his voice steady. "I wanted to check in after the event. I thought about what you said." A familiar thrill surged through her. She willed herself to listen, arms crossed gently at her chest, both a shield and a sign of confidence. "I appreciate you wanting to discuss it. Took a lot for me to speak up," she offered, her voice measured. "I admire that. You stood out, Sarah. You spoke truth in a room full of people who often forget what really matters." There was a softness in his gaze now, one that warmed the edges of her hesitant heart. "I'm developing a program for educational reform in underserved areas, and I could really use your input." The invitation pulled at the strings of her ambition and curiosity. Could she influence policy and truly impact students' lives on a grander scale? But then the specter of doubt crept back in like a shadow, whispering that she was ill-equipped to provide real insight. "You really think I can help with that?" she asked, her trepidation framing her question. "I'm just a teacher." "Exactly," Jake replied, his tone earnest. "You are a teacher, someone who understands the needs of the students firsthand. What gets lost in boardroom meetings is the real-world impact of decisions. I believe you could help ground this initiative in reality." His faith shattered the walls of her inadequacy, flooding her with a fierce pride nestled in vulnerability. Yet the enormity of the task loomed large. What if she failed? What if her voice was drowned out again? As their conversation unfolded, Sarah committed to exploring this opportunity. Her mission to advocate for educational equity was matched by the potential of shaping policy, but she remained conscious that stepping into this role would require her to confront not just the external challenges but her internal fears as well. Jake leaned closer, his gaze locked onto hers, intensity pulsating in the air between them. "Let us meet regularly. I want to help you gain the confidence you need to speak." The leap into a world she had often viewed through the lens of envy now beckoned like an open door, inviting her to walk through. She sensed destiny intertwining with dilemma, a path of uncertainty paved alongside chances to rediscover herself. As they left the cafe, excitement blossomed, and yet a question lingered like steam from the cups they had just finished. Would success wrestle with vulnerability, or would it fracture her newfound resolve? The potential for a fresh start illuminated in her mind, yet shadows of doubt still clung, reminding her that the next decision held the power to reshape everything. Jake's hand brushed hers as they stepped out, and she felt the weight of choices pressing down like an anchor. Approaching a crossroads, she thought, What if I can redefine my story, or will it all slip away once again? With determination teetering on a tightrope of hope and fear, she hesitated, enthralled by the gravitational pull of possibility before her. With every step Sarah took away from the cafe, a mix of determination and apprehension settled like a weight on her shoulders. The bustling city life wrapped around her, cars honking and people rushing, but her mind was distant, detached. She was walking the same streets she always had, yet they felt foreign and filled with opportunity. The ambitious future Jake suggested was daunting. It felt like standing on the edge of a diving board, peering into uncertain depths below. Those initial moments clung to her thoughts. You stood out. Those words reverberated, battling with her internal critic that whispered, "You don't belong here." In her heart, she yearned for more, to leave a mark beyond the classroom. But what if she was just a teacher, defined by a role that felt constraining? At home, she sank into her couch, her surroundings achingly familiar. Shadows danced across the walls, a quiet reminder of her small-town roots. She stared at the array of her lesson plans spread across the coffee table, each one a puzzle piece of her life. But now they seemed like shackles instead of stepping stones. In that moment, Sarah realized. She had to redefine her vision, not just for herself, but for the future she hoped to help sculpt. With her heart racing, she grabbed her notebook and jotted down every essence of her vision. Educational reform wasn't just a phrase. It was a movement waiting for her voice. The need for change surged through her like a current, demanding to be acknowledged. The reality of the task looming ahead felt intimidating. Changing an educational system was monumental, filled with bureaucracy and densely packed with stakeholders who often lost sight of the kids within those structures. Yet, as Sarah penned her thoughts, a spark ignited. Her experiences and struggles were valid. They resonated with the voices of countless students who felt invisible. The evenings slipped away, consumed by new ideas and strategies she needed to explore. Her phone buzzed with a message from Jake, asking if they could meet the next week to discuss logistics. The familiarity of his request was now intertwined with her ambition. She typed back a swift yes, knowing that each session would require her to summon that inner strength she so desperately wanted to cultivate. But between the fire of determination and the fear of failure lingered a nagging question. If she failed to convince others of her vision, would she still have worth? She took a moment to breathe, closing her eyes. The very idea of speaking publicly, pitching her beliefs, felt like learning to swim in an ocean she had always watched from the shore. There was no choice but to plunge in. Days blended into a whirlwind of charts, summaries, and research. She sought out educational journals and policy proposals. Each article tinted with stories of hardship became fuel for her fire. She started to shadow different educators, learning their struggles and triumphs, weaving her experiences and insights into a tapestry of knowledge. But with this newfound clarity came a lingering doubt. What if her contributions were met with resistance? What if she was labeled an outsider, a teacher lacking the credentials to voice her opinion? It was a mental tug-of-war, but each battle etched lines of resolve deeper within her as their scheduled meeting approached. Tension knotted in her stomach. Would she be able to articulate the urgency of her vision without second-guessing herself? Jake had extended the olive branch, but now she needed to bear the weight of responsibility. Her ideas were her own to defend, fiercely. The day finally arrived, the walls of the conference room looming like sentinels watching over her. As she entered, she caught Jake's reassuring smile, igniting a flicker of courage. They would review the aspects of her proposal together. But in that moment, Sarah knew the true challenge awaited. This was only the beginning of her journey, a chance to discover if she could stand firm in her beliefs. But what if the courage she mustered crumbled under scrutiny? Determined to evolve, Sarah straightened her shoulders and took a breath, ready to confront whatever awaited. The time had come to face not just the scrutiny of others but the uncertainties that had haunted her for so long. With a heart full of hope, she stepped inside, each step echoing a silent promise to herself. She would rise, or she would learn to fly. As Sarah settled into the austere conference room chairs, a wave of uncertainty washed over her. The scattered notes in front of her were a melange of her passion and anxiety, words that felt unsteady beneath her fingertips. Jake gestured toward her proposal, eyes glinting with expectation, but a knot tightened in her gut. Would he see the value of her vision, or would he dismiss it as the impractical musings of a disillusioned teacher? Her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke, weaving together her proposals with stories of students who slipped through the cracks, a transformation unfolded within her. The discussion blossomed into an exchange confrontational yet constructive. Jake challenged her ideas, often playing devil's advocate, but each counterargument forced Sarah to dig deeper into her convictions. She discovered an ability to articulate her thoughts with clarity that surprised her. The tension began to shift. What felt like a scrutiny morphed into rigorous intellectual engagement. Through each assertion, she accessed hidden reserves of confidence cultivated in her years in the classroom. The resilience ingrained in her from navigating countless school board meetings, parent-teacher conferences, and late-night lesson planning surged to the forefront. Every hesitant moment allowed her to craft counterpoints highlighting the urgency of reform. She discovered not only her capability to persuade but also a powerful need to be heard. Midway through, Jake leaned forward, pushing a strand of hair away from his eyes. Your passion is infectious, but passion isn't always enough. You need data. How will you measure progress? What if the people in power are unwilling to change? The challenge pierced her, igniting both her defensiveness and her determination. I'll prove them wrong, she responded, her voice steadied by newfound resolve. If we can frame our approach with the success stories, if I can gather data from the classrooms on the ground, I believe we can sway them. We can create a pilot program, something manageable yet impactful. A flicker of approval flashed in Jake's eyes. Now you're talking, he said, pushing back against the desk, visibly intrigued. But Sarah's heart raced. This could mean delving even deeper into her own life experiences, confronting her limitations, and challenging the status quo. However, as the conversation progressed, a shadow loomed over her triumphs. If she was to truly challenge the norms, she couldn't just put together statistics. She needed to expose the failings of the system, to reveal the emotional toll it took on students, teachers, and families alike. And that required peeling back layers of vulnerability previously hidden behind her professional facade. Are you prepared for that? She questioned herself, feeling the familiar dread spiral back in. If she took this path, it wouldn't merely be about teaching anymore. This would require a deep dive into the emotional core of her past. Would she uncover experiences still raw and tender? Would stripping away her protective layers leave her exposed to judgment from those she wished to convince? Just as she began to gather her thoughts, the door creaked open, and a new figure stepped inside. Sarah's heart raced at the sight of a stern-looking administrator from the school district she'd always viewed as an impenetrable fortress. She felt a wave of panic wash over her. What did this mean for her proposal? Was the very essence of her vision about to be scrutinized by a gatekeeper of the establishment she sought to change? With the room suddenly charged with tension, Sarah braced herself for the confrontation. Would this meeting become a crucible for her ideas, or would she be forced to abandon her mission before it even began? The administrator stepped further into the room, her presence commanding instant attention. Sarah's heart drummed in her chest as she studied the woman's straight-backed posture and the cool determination etched on her face. Was this figure of authority going to validate her aspirations or dismantle her very foundation? Ms. Thompson, the administrator began, her voice crisp and authoritative. I just came from a meeting regarding your proposed pilot program. Each word felt like a stone dropped into a pond, rippling outwards with echoes that filled the room with possibility and dread alike. Jake's curiosity piqued, shifting the focus as he leaned closer. What can you share with us? Grappling with the uncertainty, Sarah's mind raced between optimism and insecurity. This was not just about her ideas, this was about her very identity as an educator in a system rich with complexity. Could she muster the courage to challenge convention now, especially in front of this formidable figure? The administrator's gaze pinched. She seemed to assess the room's energy before continuing. I've reviewed your proposal. It's ambitious, but ambition must be tempered with sustainability. The way she emphasized the last word sent a chill through Sarah. Was this an insurmountable barrier masked as constructive feedback? I understand that, Sarah replied, determined to maintain her poise. But change is often disruptive before it becomes sustainable. We can no longer afford to merely sustain ineffective practices that harm our students. The urgency is real. The growing intensity of her voice surprised her, each syllable propelled by an ethos developed through years of fighting for her students. The administrator paused, eyebrows raising, seemingly impressed by Sarah's conviction. You might have a point, but we need to consider the consequences of radical shifts. Convincing the board will require more than just emotional appeal. With each statement, Sarah felt the layers of her professional facade beginning to peel away. The administrator's probing presented not merely an obstacle but an opportunity to dig deeper into her motivations. The resistance felt all too familiar, as if Sarah was back in the classroom, battling to reach a student who had given up altogether. Perhaps I can collaborate with faculty for qualitative data, Sarah suggested, a sudden clarity washing over her. A narrative combined with statistics can highlight the emotional realities that numbers alone won't convey. Let us focus on qualitative testimonies alongside quantitative assessments. This shift in strategy felt liberating. It symbolized not just a tactic but an assertion of her identity, one that could bridge her passion and the systemic expectations. The administrator narrowed her eyes, signaling deliberation. How willing are you to encompass all angles of this challenge? She inquired. Your success hinges on your ability to address fears, fiscal implications, and ongoing resistance. The question hung in the air, grave and penetrating. Could Sarah truly confront the multifaceted opposition ahead? What would it cost her to drive this initiative? I am ready to commit, she asserted, resolving within herself that vulnerability was not weakness. It was a crucial part of her growth. Whatever it takes, I believe in this vision. As she spoke, a proverbial door cracked open within her. She was no longer just a teacher seeking change. She was stepping into her role as a catalyst. The administrator's expression softened just slightly, a flicker of respect emerging. The conversation moved forward, dissecting the layers required to build her proposal into something more tangible. Yet the weight of the administrator's earlier question lingered like a storm cloud overhead. With every step taken, Sarah felt the gravity of her choices. Each discussion unearthed her strengths and unveiled areas of uncertainty she could no longer evade. Would the power dynamics shift, or would the entrenched beliefs of the establishment smother her aspirations? As the meeting wrapped up, Sarah had gained a handful of critical insights, but the question remained. Was she prepared to expose the foundation of her practice, risking everything she had fought to uphold? She emerged from the confrontation invigorated yet apprehensive. Her path lay illuminated by the spark she had ignited. But shadows lingered, waiting to embrace the weaknesses she exposed. The moment of revelation loomed, and just when she thought she had to internalize the mounting tension, a knowing glance between Jake and the administrator solidified her suspicions. The real hurdle was yet to come. Would she be able to face the dictums of authority imposing boundaries on her vision? In this dance of ambition and fear, one thing was certain: Sarah was poised on the brink of transformation, and the next step would define not only her program but her entire legacy. As she stepped out of the meeting room, Sarah's pulse raced, the echoes of the administrator's words reverberating in her mind. The air felt thick with anticipation and uncertainty, and the fluorescent lights above flickered unsteadily, mirroring the tumult within her. Each moment passed ignited a sense of urgency. She had to act, to address the hesitation that was creeping into her reflections. The question of how far she was willing to go to defend her vision weighed heavily on her. Back at her classroom, the walls adorned with student art pieces felt both familiar and stifling. She took a moment to breathe, to ground herself in the sanctuary she had created for her students. Yet, even in this comfort, her doubts threatened to take root. Was she truly prepared for the implications of her commitment? Every teacher she knew had conditioned her to accept caution over chaos. Perhaps that instinct was precisely what needed to be challenged. Over the next few days, Sarah immersed herself in research, combing through educational journals and statistics that supported the need for reform. What she found was both unsettling and empowering. Reports highlighted the detrimental effects of outdated methods, yet equally emphasized the hesitance of administrations to enact change due to perceived impracticalities. The weight of responsibility pressed against her chest. She needed to confront that hesitance directly, to turn the doubt others felt into a rallying point for her initiative. She reached out to colleagues, presenting her ideas in small gatherings over coffee, gauging their reactions. Some expressed support, recalling their own classroom frustrations, while others shrugged, resistant to the notion that a shift was necessary. With each setback, a familiar tension rose within her. This was her instinct to educate at odds with the reality of systemic inertia. Yet, she recognized the need for structured feedback as well. She had to harness this energy carefully. While experiencing a rising frustration, Jake expressed his belief in her vision. "You're onto something big, Sarah," he encouraged over lunch. "But you have to be tactical. Maybe create a pilot with a smaller group first? If it works, you'll have proof to back your claims." His advice struck a chord. The thought of starting small seemed less daunting, yet profoundly significant. It could be her pathway to greater change. Inspired, she spent the next few days drafting a more refined version of her proposal that included pilot details. She envisioned targeted assessments within specific classrooms, carefully chosen to reflect broader demographics, ensuring that data was as inclusive as possible. In collaborating with a few enthusiastic educators, she synthesized their narratives alongside her proposed quantitative analysis. Suddenly vast opportunities unfolded, each collaboration illuminating strengths she hadn't realized existed within her colleagues. Yet, beneath this external progress, inwardly, Sarah battled waves of doubt that threatened to drown her ambitions. Was this a true transformation or merely a temporary surge of inspiration? The thoughts ambushed her at every hour, filling her with anxiety about whether the administrators and board would genuinely support her vision. Every night, they flared like storm clouds in her brain. Was it her unyielding nature or her unpreparedness that would dictate her eventual fate? One evening, consumed by her thoughts, she found herself flipping through her old teaching journals, reflecting on her earlier days. She came across entries that detailed her initial struggles and victories in the classroom. In those pages, she discovered a hidden fortitude she had once believed so vigorously in her abilities to educate and uplift, despite all the limitations surrounding her. Renewed by this trip down memory lane, Sarah realized she had to harness that original spark. She was not pursuing change just for herself. She was doing this for every student who sat in her classroom, for every voice that needed to be heard. And with that revelation, her determination crystallized into focused intent. The next day she would present the revised proposal to the administrator. But lurking in her mind was an unsettling thought. Was her resolve strong enough to withstand impending resistance? The time had come to face the true heart of opposition. The fabric of her aspirations hung in a precarious balance. And now, daring for change meant testing the fabric of her self-belief. The next moment demanded courage, as it would unveil whether Sarah would become the architect of her own professional destiny or remain bound by a system too fearful to evolve. As the sun rose the following morning, casting sharp shadows across her cluttered desk, Sarah's stomach twisted into knots at the thought of presenting her proposal. Each page felt like it carried the weight of her ambition, each statistic an incriminating flaw waiting to be exposed. She had polished her words carefully, but now, facing the day ahead, the polished veneer felt flimsy against the raw apprehension gnawing at her. She arrived early at school, the hallways still echoing with silence, giving her a brief respite to gather her thoughts. Sarah replayed Jake's advice in her mind, reminding herself of the power in starting small. But could she genuinely convey to the administrator the urgency that fueled her initiative? Was she equipped to confront the possible dismissal from those in positions of authority who preferred to keep things as they were? Every heartbeat seemed to push her toward the door of the conference room, yet a part of her wanted to retreat. The administrator's office loomed larger than life, a bastion of the status quo. Sarah inhaled sharply, reminding herself of the deeper purpose behind her mission. It was about her students, their future. The engagement that she felt was inadequate in the current curriculum. As she knocked lightly, her resolve wavered. What if her ideas laid bare her naivete? Would she be seen as an overzealous dreamer or worse, a disruptor? "Come in," A voice called from within, breaking her reverie. She pushed the door open, stepping into the brightly lit room that seemed to swallow her whole. But as she took her seat, the tension morphed into adrenaline. This was at the moment where she could either empower herself or retreat into silence. Her voice steadied as she began, outlining her intent to launch a pilot program focused on enhancing student engagement through innovative methods. The administrator listened, his expression inscrutable, as she laid out the groundwork she had meticulously prepared. Sarah noticed an eyebrow raise and a slight frown forming with each statistic she introduced. With every word that flowed, her initial energy began to morph into raw urgency, her voice rising with passion. But then came the flash of resistance, a question posed with thinly veiled skepticism. And where is the evidence that these methods will yield better results? Isn't this more about your personal philosophy than actual data-driven practices? His challenge sliced through her momentum. For a moment, she faltered, the fear of her proposal collapsing before her, clouding her mind. But then, she remembered her students, the inspiration that had reignited within her. With all due respect, our traditional methods have failed many of them. The data I've compiled showcases not just potential, but actual cases demonstrating the detrimental impact of adhering to outdated pedagogy. This pilot isn't just a theory, it's a necessity. She leaned forward, her determination fervent. The administrator sat back, crossing his arms as he considered her words. This back and forth ignited a fire inside Sarah, propelling her forward. For the first time, she felt empowered to defend her vision rather than hedge against it. Yet, just as she began to see slight intrigue flicker in his eyes, he interrupted her thoughts with another line of inquiry that pulled her up short. However, if your pilot fails, what then? Are you prepared to face the backlash from your colleagues? The implications could ripple beyond that classroom. Her stomach churned at the thought, but she clenched her jaw, forcing the words out. If I'm afraid to fail, I'll never dare to innovate. It was a testament not just to her professional ethos, but to the hundreds of young minds she served every day. As the meeting stretched on, the exchange became more contentious. In the moments that followed, her confidence oscillated. She wanted clarity, yet she sensed the administrator's willingness to overlook the innovative edge she represented. Emerging from the room, her heart pounded with exhilaration and anxiety. Had she inspired a glimpse of possibility or cemented her place as an outlier? The answer dangled in the air over her like an unresolved note. Nothing was certain, and her next steps loomed ahead as an unknown labyrinth. Would she have the fortitude to seize opportunities if her proposal was turned down? The specter of resistance threatened to tighten its grip, a reminder that personal evolution often lies on the razor's edge of adversity. And as she stepped away, uncertainty mixed with a stubborn fire ignited in her spirit. One final confrontation awaited, one that would reveal her true mettle in the face of opposition. The echo of the administrator's disbelief rang in Sarah's ears as she navigated out of the office, her heart pounding with frustration and exhilaration. Each step felt heavier, yet the resolve within her burned brighter than before. Was she truly prepared for the scrutiny that lay ahead? The thought echoed in her mind like a pendulum, swinging between doubt and determination. She made her way back to her classroom. The hallways buzzed with the chatter of students, animated conversations that contrasted sharply with the uncertainty she felt. The vibrant energy of her students jolted her back to the purpose of her mission. They were the reason she fought against the complacency that chained so many educators to outdated practices. Sarah could envision their bright faces engaging fully with lessons that invited creativity, that sparked curiosity about the world around them. Leaning against her classroom door, Sarah took a deep breath, ruminating on the administrator's challenge. What if her proposal did fail? The thought stung, but amid the sting was a tether to authenticity. So many had clung to their safe zones, afraid to step beyond the confines of pedagogical tradition. She closed her eyes, picturing the classroom conversations that would blossom from her initiative, the discussions catalyzed by innovative methods that brought curriculum to life. But the fear of potential backlash gnawed at her. Colleagues had their reputations to guard, their silence molded from years of delegation to the semblance of normalcy. They had their own battles to fight, yet here she stood the potential challenger of that status quo. Instead of retreating into her insecurities, Sarah sat at her desk and opened her notebook, the pages filled with brainstormed ideas and strategies. With each stroke of the pen, she felt her confidence solidifying. It was time to strategize her next move. A blind acceptance of the administrator's skepticism was not in her repertoire. She would not concede quietly. To be heard in the midst of resistance, she needed to take control of her narrative rather than letting it be defined by others. Hours slipped by as she meticulously revised her proposal, restructuring it with the insights from their meeting. She crafted scenarios that demonstrated tangible adaptations case studies from other schools that showcased innovative practices leading to increased student performance. She embedded metrics, evidence, testimonials, and the call for collaborative feedback from her peers, ensuring that her proposal became a collective vision rather than a solitary ambition. That evening, illuminating her path was her journal, where she often distilled her thoughts in candid reflections. Writing felt akin to finding a confidant who wouldn't judge but would listen. As her thoughts flowed, she discovered a hidden vein of resilience that she hadn't recognized before, one that not only feared failure, but also thirsted for the raw essence of transformation. Days passed, and with each interaction with colleagues, she found an unexpected ally here and there. A teacher who expressed curiosity about her initiative, another who mirrored her concerns. These small connections began to form a network of support. She was not alone in this venture, and slowly, the climate began to shift, the air thickening with cautious hopefulness. Yet, with the burgeoning enthusiasm came realization she would need to confront the administrator again. If she truly wanted her vision to see the light of day, she would need to present her refined proposal with relentless conviction. The fear of rejection would need to be a mere footnote in her story. As she secured her proposal in an envelope, the familiar feeling of apprehension bubbled up anew, but this time, it carried with it the undeniable weight of purpose. Sarah decided she would confront the administrator with a dialogue instead of a monologue, inviting collaboration rather than mere acceptance. The next day would be pivotal, and she could feel the anticipation tightening around her. A moment of truth awaited. Was she prepared to face her adversary not just as a challenger in education, but as a believer in change? The moment had arrived. The confrontation that could redefine her path, or potentially spell her end, loomed over her like an unresolved note, rich with possibility. Determination surged through Sarah as she entered the building the next morning, her proposal clutched firmly under her arm. She navigated the corridor with a mix of anticipation and anxiety, pushing aside the fluttering doubts that tried to creep in. Today was not about self-doubt but rather the assertion of her vision. Her classroom was a sanctuary nestled within the cacophony of educational bureaucracy, filled with the exuberance of youth that constantly reminded her why she fought for change. Closing her eyes momentarily as she stepped into the room, she recalled the faces of her students, those wide-eyed dreamers eager to learn, explore, and connect with the world. They were her motivation, her driving force, and the pulse of her initiative. As she prepared for the day's lessons, she mentally rehearsed her conversation with the administrator. The key would be to frame the proposal as a tool not just for her classroom, but for the entire school community. It was a shared mission, not solely Sarah's endeavor, but a collective leap toward cultivating a vibrant educational atmosphere. This perspective shift was crucial that an hour later, when the final bell rang, the familiar pit swimming in her stomach signaled it was time to engage in what she had been meticulously planning. She made her way to the administrator's office, her heart racing with each step. The imposing door loomed ahead, yet now it felt less like a fortress and more like a threshold to a new reality. Gently tapping the door, Sarah entered without waiting for an invitation. The administrator was at her desk, quill in hand, looking up with a mixture of surprise and annoyance, an expression Sarah had seen many times before. "You again?" was the response, clinging to the air like stale perfume. "Actually, yes," Sarah said, her voice steady, surprising even herself. "I wanted to speak with you about my proposal again." The disinterested look danced briefly on the administrator's face. "I didn't expect you back so soon, but I suppose you have more to say?" "I do," Sarah said, taking a breath to anchor her resolve. For the first time, she sat across from the administrator, the distance between them reduced to mere inches. I want this proposal to be a collaborative effort, not just mine. I believe it can spearhead a necessary evolution in our educational practices, and I want your insight on it. The administrator arched an eyebrow, perhaps intrigued by the abrupt shift in Sarah's approach. This was the moment that would define whether her mission would flourish or flounder. I've gathered evidence, examples from other institutions successfully implementing these changes. I want us to lead this together, engage others, and make it a shared vision. She continued, her passion rising like a tide. If we involve the teachers and the students, we can create something transformative. The silence that followed hung heavy. An unmistakable tension cloaked the space between them. Sarah's mind raced. Would skeptical scrutiny drown her aspirations? Or could she illuminate a glimmer of possibility? What if it doesn't succeed? The administrator asked, a concern etched on her brow. A reputation is hard to recover. What struck Sarah wasn't fear anymore, but a resolution fortified by the network of support she had quietly built among her colleagues, those who felt trapped in the confines of traditional methods. What if it does? She countered, her voice unwavering. What if we ignite a passion for learning that resonates far beyond our current practices? Isn't success rooted in innovation? A flicker of curiosity, perhaps even hope, mirrored in the administrator's eyes. Sarah seized the moment, leaning in just slightly, urging the conversation into a partnership rather than a monologue. Let us pilot these ideas, gather data, and assess them together. We can expand beyond our routines and redefine education for our students. As Sarah spoke, the initial opposition she had felt began to dissolve. Perhaps this was the catalyst for change. She realized then that her fear of rejection was dwarfed by her belief in collaboration and improvement. The administrator leaned back, fingers steepled, evaluating Sarah's proposition. A small crease formed on her brow, and in that moment, Sarah caught a glimpse of something. Was it realization? A crack in the wall of indifference? Are you truly prepared for the feedback and scrutiny that will follow this? The administrator finally asked. More than ever, Sarah replied, determination flooding her senses. This isn't solely my voice. It's ours. This was it. Their fates intertwined within the chaotic world of education, one proposal, one vision at a time. But just as she felt a flicker of triumph, the administrator's next words tumbled out, shifting the ground beneath her once again. If we move forward, I'll need you to lead the workshop. Are you ready to deliver that? The weight of the challenge loomed large, a demand that could either propel her forward or plunge her into uncertainty. How could she maintain her newfound momentum and avoid being overwhelmed? The next chapter of Sarah's journey was poised to unfurl with the stakes higher than ever. Was she ready to embrace the spotlight and lead others into an unknown territory? The days that followed marked a significant turning point in Sarah's journey. She had become the architect of an ambitious pilot program aimed at educational reform, a role that set her on a trajectory she had previously only dreamed about. Her mornings began early, planning every aspect of the program while harnessing the momentum she had gained from her many discussions with colleagues. The excitement became tangible. She could feel the collective belief in her vision growing among peers who had previously wavered. Sarah prepared meticulously for the workshop she had reluctantly agreed to lead. The echo of doubt from the administrator still clung to her thoughts. Could she deliver in front of her colleagues? Yet as the day approached, her anticipation morphed into confidence. She spent hours refining her presentation, weaving together compelling anecdotes from her experiences in the classroom, poignant statistics, and research supporting her proposed methods of teaching. On the day of the workshop, Sarah entered the room, the soft murmur of her peers creating a buzzing energy that resonated through her. It felt surreal. Gone was the timid teacher who second-guessed her place in academia. Instead, she stood in her own skin, ready to assert her perspective on the future of education. She took a deep breath, grounding herself in the resolve that had become a foundation over the past weeks. With each slide, Sarah articulated not just her vision but also the common frustrations shared by her colleagues. She introduced innovative teaching methods, incorporating hands-on activities that invited creative engagement from students. Her passion was infectious, It flowed through her words and into the room, igniting a fire in the hearts of those who listened. They had once seen her as just the teacher, but in that moment, she was a leader, their leader, as discussions unfolded. The initial skepticism melted away. Colleagues who had once scoffed at the idea of change were now leaning in, nodding in agreement, fueled by the rationality of her arguments. Questions turned into suggestions, forming the blueprint for a collaborative initiative that could truly revitalize their teaching practices. Sarah could feel herself transforming. The girl who trembled at every interaction now held palpable authority in her presence. The workshop concluded with a round of applause that reverberated through the room. Sarah's heart swelled. She had not only communicated her vision, but had mobilized an entire group of educators toward action. She left feeling not just accomplished, but empowered. Validation from her peers confirmed that she was seen as an equal in a space that had once felt intimidating. She had broken down barriers, her own insecurities, along with the walls of complacency surrounding her colleagues. Jake, who had promised to support her, stood waiting in the lobby. His beaming smile was magnetic, echoing the pride she felt within herself. "You crushed it," he exclaimed, enveloping her in an embrace that felt like the cherry on top of her victory cake. They began discussing next steps for gathering data and collecting feedback, the synergy between them tangible. Suddenly, the challenges she had previously feared seemed inconsequential. She shared her aspirations for bigger changes and systemic influence, crafting plans to present to the school board backed by the support of her colleagues. Each milestone moved her closer to her ultimate goal, becoming an advocate for educational reform on a wider scale, impacting countless young lives. Sarah praised herself for embracing vulnerability. Confronting her fears had opened doors she never expected. Her transformation entailed more than asserting her authority. It became a comprehensive understanding of her own worth in a male-dominated field. She was no longer just a teacher pushing through daily lessons. She was a leader, a catalyst of change, an educator determined to redefine success beyond monetary measures. Months down the line, the pilot program showed incredible promise. Data began to reflect its success, fostering curiosity and engagement among students. When the first round of assessments rolled out, the results surpassed those of previous years. A budding confidence began to blossom not only within Sarah but also in the hands of her fellow educators, who actively collaborated on innovative strategies spawned from her leadership. The recognition for her efforts soon trickled in. The school board respected her vision, applauding her results at their meetings. Sarah received commendations, yet it never overshadowed her intrinsic motivation rooted in her passion for educational equity. Her journey reflected a metaphor for boundless possibilities. She had multiple publications authored, her voice echoing in both academia and media, advocating for those students who felt lost in conventional systems. In the end, Sarah stood before the mirror, acknowledging the woman who stared back at her. She had proven time and again that wealth is not the sole criterion for success. Her confidence solidified, competence recognized. She now forged ahead with a new identity, one steadfast in the difference she made. It was her story of transformation, an authentic legacy shining brightly against the backdrop of a once feeble past. Now, as she reflected on her journey, she hoped to inspire others to take the leap, to embrace their vulnerabilities, to unlock the doors of possibility waiting for them. And she knew that to achieve true change, every educator must face their own crossroads, just as she had. Here's your moment. You need to subscribe now to witness the next chapter of personal transformations and unfolding stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support this movement. Comment below your thoughts and theories about how Sarah's journey resonates with you. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need inspiration. Your engagement fuels stories of overcoming challenges, illuminating paths through the darkness.